building my Primerica business, it was accountability because I had to set examples for my people. And if they saw me not doing it, or if I was faking like I was doing it, they would eventually smell me out, right? You can't fake it.
Welcome back to the Healing Works podcast. Excited to be here today. We're excited to have Brandon Neal and Jeff Fieldstad from, well, we know them anyway, but from the Solid podcast. We were on their podcast, back in September?
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Yeah.
Need to have you back on again.
For sure.
A while ago.
It was good. Yeah.
But Brandon and Jeff, very successful individuals. Want to talk about that today. But how we know them as well, Brandon Neal is our brother-in-law. So we have to like him anyway. So
at least act like it.
Does anybody ever like a brother-in-law?
It's rough. It's rough.
Hey, I knew him long before he was my brother-in-law, so we're cool like that.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Altie and Brandon grew up in the same ward
Neighborhood
back in
Block away from
back
each
in
other.
Sandy.
Yeah.
Back in the day, and then
We went on Pioneer Trek together.
We did.
As a youth group.
I had to carry Altie up the hill because she was blind and deaf and something else.
I pulled
he
the
had some
card.
sort of
I had like
disease.
scarlet fever.
That's what it
So
was.
we were on this youth trek, and things would come up and be like, "Oh, you just came down with scarlet fever," and I did. So I had to ride in the wagon, and they had to pull me. And Brandon has never forgotten that. They let me forget that.
It was rough.
But
how many were in the wagon? I never went. I never went.
Nobody,
just her and
nobody,
the
because we
gear.
were pulling the gear,
Yeah.
and then someone would get sick on the
she had
road
to
on the
ride
trek,
on
and I had to.
But there was
and I-
only one person riding in there at a time. Okay.
Yeah, one sick
Was it
person.
heavy though? Like
Oh,
legit?
dude.
Okay.
Like so heavy.
Oh
Heavy
gosh,
enough
I was
to
like
cause
90
trauma.
pounds. Heavy enough
He
to
never
never
forgot
forget. Yeah.
Enough to cause trauma.
Still
haven't
talking
gotten over
about it.
I'm still injured
Well,
from it
okay,
all.
so one of the nights or one of the evenings, it was like the females had to pull the wagon because it was like the men got called off to war, and so they had to
It was equal opportunity.
yeah. yeah.
There you go.
I mean, it was just
All
this,
right.
supposed to be this spiritual building experience.
Because that really happened.
Yeah, it really did
During
happen.
the Pioneer, the
Yeah.
men had to go to war. And
Men had to go to
women
war,
had to pull
women
the-
had to
Right.
carry on, right? And it was supposed to be
the
this.
Tatanka.
Yeah,
Exactly.
It was
The
supposed to
Wapiti.
be this really spiritual experience where, like, normally, like everybody would be crying because it would be so hard to pull the wagon, and the women were struggling, and the guys were crying because they couldn't help, and you guys were like laughing at us.
Yeah, we were teenage boys who weren't taking it.
It didn't hit the way they were hoping it did, and we were like, this is not
We
funny.
we missed the point on that one. Yeah.
That's funny.
It was fun though. It was good times.
Yeah.
How many miles?
I don't know. I mean,
It was
it
like
was a few
2
days, 2 or 3
days.
days.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
you just
You camp out.
Yeah.
Oh,
Dutch
yeah.
oven and everything.
You got to wear Pioneer clothes. You
Yeah.
can't- yeah.
You couldn't bring deodorant. They went through our bags
Can't
to make
wear
sure we didn't
shorts.
have any
Middle of
like
summer.
Walkman. We didn't have,
Walkman.
Yeah.
we couldn't bring Walkman, and we couldn't bring
Walkmans
deodorant.
were legit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Sounds awesome.
It was pretty pioneerish.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was good. It's
It
good
was.
for kids to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Testimony meeting, and
Yeah.
it's good. But yeah, so we go way back before we were actually family.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yep.
And then Brandon's wife Lexi was just on the previous couple episodes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I won't be near as good as her, but just so it doesn't have their expectations too high.
Well, for those of
Lexi
you,
did very well.
for those
did.
of you who
It was
listened
awesome.
to Lexi, and she was talking about how articulate her husband is, and how she has a hard time sometimes processing as fast as he does in a conversation. You'll hear why today.
Now you get the real deal.
Yep.
The real deal, Brandon Neal. Yep.
right.
Mr.
Real
Quick
deal.
witted.
Yep.
Yeah.
You gotta be on your toes.
He's quick
Sometimes.
on the fly, you know.
This is good. Yep. And then Jeff, we've known Jeff a little while too, but Jeff, you knew Brandon from Primerica
Yep.
and in the business. And how long have you known Brandon?
Gosh.
Or you guys know each other?
2004.
Okay.
So almost 20 years. Yeah. 19.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah.
You guys have done a lot in 20 years, I will
Yeah.
say.
There's been a lot of,
You guys have done a lot in 20 years.
I mean, individually and collectively, you know.
Yeah. It's been an awesome ride for sure.
It has.
Yeah.
And it keeps getting better, which is cool.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Yeah, you guys are working on some real Cool stuff.
We are, and with you guys too. I'm excited about everything that you guys do. The work you guys do is just very impactful. Those who listen to this podcast, hopefully, are getting a good taste of that. I do, I know, and it definitely impacts my life. You just did some work on me yesterday, which I needed at the time, and it's like an instant. You feel it, So
Thank you.
It's real, and over the years, just we can talk about this today. Probably just how I lived my life, built my business. It worked really well. But also in other ways could have been much better had I known what I know now from everything you guys do. So
yeah, I think that's a hard thing too, is like, as you start learning and then you look back sometimes like, man, I wish I would have had this then, but then would you have seen it the same way? Would you have,
exactly.
Like I'm reading this book called Meditations right now by Marcus Aurelius, and I've read it before.
Yep.
It's hitting totally different now, huh?
Yeah, I didn't even get it.
Yeah.
I just wasn't ready. So I had the same information, but I just wasn't ready for it. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, like what could I have done to put myself in a mental place to where I was ready for it at that point? Because I think it would have impacted my life so much better.
Yep.
Right. So it's just, it's funny how it works, right? We need people like you guys that can coach us and help us be emotionally ready for those things that we face in our lives, right?
Well, yeah, and thank you. And even like to that point of reading a book, like the information that I consistently study, all the science and interactions, heart, brain, everything like that. Like every day I read something, even if it's the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, every couple of weeks I'm like, oh, okay. But that's the point, right? Is like, you don't want to look back and be like, oh, I wish I knew this then, because that, to your point, like you wouldn't have grown the way you grew.
Yeah.
But then at the same point, it's that gratitude of ever improving and becoming better and better and better, right?
Yeah.
So
it's almost like as you have more experiences and your perspective changes, right? And our perspectives could change from one day to another,
right?
Based on just learning something new, seeing it a different way, sometimes having empathy or maturity, or all these things change us.
We have so many different perspectives. I mean, Jeff and I we come from completely different upbringings. I mean, really, the way we were brought up, and just our backgrounds are, I don't think could be much more polar opposite than they are.
Agreed.
Growing up in the United States of America, of course, right? Maybe if we were from different countries or something, but to both grow up in Utah and just the polar opposite of how our family dynamics worked out growing up. I mean, we can talk about some of that, I guess, but it just and then coming together 20 years ago. And I mean, I told Jeff just as he got here today, we were talking to Mallory, the one who helps with the podcast, and just like, this kid's a miracle. like how he's what he's done, what he's without, call him a kid. He's not a kid now, but he's like a kid to me because he's like my little brother. But I feel like, just what you've done to come out of what you've come out of and make your life what it is today is crazy to me because I've got great parents, I've got great examples, I've got great siblings. For the most part, we haven't had a lot of major issues that I would call issues in my family that I see, right?
Mm-hmm. You grew up in like a
roadblocks.
spiritual structure, a family structure, like everything was
an encouraging environment,
positive, great examples. Not perfect, of course, but
sure.
I couldn't ask for anything better, right?
Yeah.
And I know Lexi talked about your parents too, and just all that. Kevin, your parents, we've been very fortunate with that, and Jeff, not so much. And you've been able to somehow come out of that situation and make your life, I guess, change your whole family dynamic.
Yeah. Well, I think,
do you want to share real quick?
Yeah, please.
We talked about it on the Solid podcast, or you guys talk about it often, but give a little bit of background of where you came from.
For sure. I guess I can. But to preface that, I think the two important things is, number one, Brandon's like, seriously, I always tell him I changed my life. Is like having that example you grew up in is, I didn't know how much that was going to impact my life, but it did, right? So it was one, I was open and willing. I wanted to change, but then I was, like we were talking the other day, like I just looked up to you so much that I was willing to do whatever. I cut my hair the same, dress the same, say the same jokes, whatever, because I just wanted to change my life. So number one is, you provided a great example because of that. And it's awesome to think, really generationally that your example impacts people's lives, right? Mm-hmm. And then number two is I don't think I would change my childhood. I don't think, because if I did, would I be open? Would I have been willing and have this desire for change? Because it was hard, you know, it wasn't easy to change. And so I guess I'm just grateful for it. You know, I don't look at it as like it was something that I shouldn't have gone through. I'm grateful that that was the situation I was brought up in, you know. And I guess just to be, you know, quick, my parents were divorced when I was young. My dad was an alcoholic and was using drugs and beat up my mom. So they got divorced when I was 4. And then my mom started dating another guy who I always really considered my stepdad. They were never married, but he was the only other man in my life. And so there were 6 of us and my siblings. He had 2 kids. My mom there was 4 of us. And so there were 6 of us in the household. And it was a crazy household. We grew up in a household where, you know, my older siblings were in gangs and, you know, selling drugs. And, you know, it was just like a normal environment. I didn't even think it was like not normal. You guys know, you've been to West Valley where I grew up. It's just not, it wasn't a good environment. It's still not a good environment, you know.
Where do you fit in the lineup of your siblings?
So like I have 2 older brothers and an older sister. And then it's me and then a younger brother and a younger sister.
Okay.
And my oldest brother, I think he's getting ready to turn 50. So he's 13 years older than me. So yeah, and they were like my heroes when I was young, you know, and it was not a
run the streets like you guys one day, huh?
Well, and what's crazy is like I really was running the streets with them, you know, because I just wanted to be around my older brothers. And then so, you know, it was crazy. One of my brother's friends was murdered, and so my mom actually shipped me to Idaho to go live with my aunt. My aunt lived in a cabin up in the mountains, and she just thought, oh, Jeff will, you know, he'll do better. He can't get in trouble if he's in a cabin in the mountains. Well, I went up there, and then I got kicked out of school, you know, like within 6 months.
What part of Idaho?
In Idaho City, which is a small, teeny tiny, it used to be the capital of Idaho.
I lived in Pocatello for a minute. You know where that's at?
Yeah, I know Pocatello.
For like 5 years.
Yeah. So, yeah, how do you get in trouble in a small little logging town that there's not even a stop sign?
Right.
You know?
Did you get in a fight? Is that
I got in a fight.
Like, I'll figure it out.
Yeah. I got in a fight at school.
You can always guess. Fight.
Yeah. And, you know, I was just ornery, trying to prove myself and just felt insecure, you know, all that stuff. You know, kids call you names and grow up poor. And you just always think that's the way to handle it. And so then I got kicked out of school there. And in the meantime, my mom had moved to St. George, and she was living in a single wide trailer, and we didn't have any money. And you know, that was just as hard. It was a nicer place to live, St. George was, but the environment, honestly, I think was worse because it went from like really a lot of like gangs and violence to like everybody was just doing drugs, you know, which I think is a harder place for a kid to grow up in, honestly. And so I got in a fight one time, and this guy said, hey, why don't you guys come into my gym? I have a boxing gym right around the corner. Why do you guys come in? You guys don't get in trouble. You guys can handle it. Put some gloves on, and that way you guys don't get in trouble. And we actually went in the gym, put some gloves on, and he said, hey, if you want to come back tomorrow, I'll train you for free. And I just kept going back for years.
And that was here in St. George?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did he ever tell you what he saw in you, like just to invite you to come and do that?
He saw the eye of the tiger. That's what he saw.
This kid's a fighter.
But I think he was really a good man. Like he always used to tell us.
He knew you needed a little direction, a little.
Yeah, he said there's a spiritual battle, and at one time in our life, at some point in our lives or our children's lives, that you know you're gonna have to choose between good or evil. And his like whole thing was, I want to train up like an army of warriors that are great young men.
Awesome.
You know,
Incredible.
Yeah, and it was cool. So he was just a good man. He really changed my life and poured a lot of these great philosophies into me. And so then, you know, I was in the boxing gym every day, so I couldn't go get in trouble. I'd get my aggression out. And, you know, I would skip school to go to the gym, you know. And so it just turned out good. And then I started getting motivated because now I started changing my perspective of, hey, maybe I could do something with my life. You know, maybe I could. And that was where, you know, I started thinking I wanted to be successful. I wanted to be a professional fighter. I wanted to be a boxer. That was a way out. And then I started Primerica. And I got introduced to Primerica, and I started going, this is a way better environment. A question I asked myself early on is like, if I was going to get married and have a family, would I want to bring my wife to the boxing gym? And the answer is no, regardless of how good the environment is. The answer is you don't want to bring your wife to a boxing gym.
That's a pretty good perspective to have,
Because that was, how old were you then?
Thinking.
Yep. I mean, at this time, I was probably like 16, 17.
Okay.
Starting to think about,
Yeah.
about my future. I wanted a family. And so, yeah, that was how, and then I started Primerica.
Throw your train of thought off, or train of thought. Train of thought.
Mm-hmm.
There's a train in there somewhere.
But Jeff was telling Lexi and I, was it yesterday, the day before, about his attendance. Like, he never showed up to school, but he knew the attendance lady and had some dirt on her.
That's what Kaylee, my daughter, was telling me.
She told me that last night. I was going to bring that up.
So
I'm so grateful for her.
he knew how to work every angle, man.
Yeah.
I got dirt on you. You better make sure I've got perfect attendance.
Yeah, and I didn't even have to do that. She just knew. Like, she just knew I knew.
Her and I had an understanding.
It was just like, hey,
She
he was
knew
there.
that I knew. Yeah.
Anyway, didn't mean to
It helped me a lot because I did. I graduated with good grades, but I never went. I never went to school.
Jeff is dumb like a fox. You know what I'm saying? Like, he knows how to figure it out.
He's like, thank you.
Yeah, serious.
Oh, this is good.
He's smart like a fox.
Smart like a fox. Exactly.
He plays dumb, but he's smart like a
That's
fox.
what I mean.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I mean.
So yeah, just that. Then that really, and then I started Primerica, and then, just started getting around great people.
Well, and when you started in Primerica, you didn't start as an agent like they do. It's insurance business. You started working in their office, and you started surrounding yourself with these guys that are doing something with their lives. You picked up on that, but you weren't getting involved the way that Brandon was yet. You were watching and learning.
What was funny too, by the way, is how did Jeff come into the business? Is you knew your ex-husband, aunt and uncle lived here, right? And they were friends with the Nelsons, and Nick Nelson's wife worked at Polo where he worked.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how it all kind of connected too.
Yep.
And
Polo.
yeah,
Did you
Polo.
flip your collar?
The Polo outlet in St. George.
every
Like
color.
everyone knew the
In fact,
Polo
Jeff
outlet.
was on your team in Primerica when you did Primerica for a little while.
Yeah.
So that's what's kind of crazy.
It is. It's crazy how.
So it's all
looking
connected.
back,
Full circle.
Yeah, it all works out. Huh?
So so that's the short story of.
So did you ever see your dad after he left when you were 4?
A couple of times, yeah. When my wife and I moved to Boise in 2007, and he had actually moved to Boise around the same time to try to start, mending our relationship, I guess. But he was still an alcoholic, and so I think we saw him maybe twice.
Oh, okay.
And then a couple of years later, he died. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
he passed away from drinking too much.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Sad. So.
Sorry to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it just, it was just a weird thing. My wife got to meet him, which is good, but it also, I think that was one of the driving factors is after I started having kids, I started thinking I love my kids so much, and I know he did too, but his choices and the decisions he made led him down such a different path that it was hard for him to change, right? Yeah. It was so ingrained in who he was, but it actually made me better because it made me want to not be different or do the opposite. It just made me think about really how my choices were going to impact my life long term, Yeah. So, is the silver lining in it all is I really think that whole situation made me a better man,
Yeah, what was that thing you texted me today? The circumstances of life don't dictate our life, our decisions do. Is that what it was?
So you just
verbatim. That's pretty good.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a perfect segue into that. But that's exactly true.
Well, it's powerful. You know, I mean, how many things happen to us on a daily basis, and how we react to them, and the decisions we make. We're never a victim unless we choose to be, right?
Right.
And I think if we can remember that, we can maintain our power.
Absolutely.
Well, and look at that. I mean, I don't know the history, your dad's history and what he went through himself, or maybe even generational trauma or whatever, but it's quite possible that your upbringing could have been more traumatic or difficult than what he actually faced. But because of your decisions, how he decided to handle it versus how you decided to handle it, 2 totally different outcomes.
Yeah, no doubt.
And one, empowered you in that and created great success in family and finances and spiritually and all the things. And his was self-destruction until his physical body tapped out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of life and someone, being in an environment like the business we were in, I would see all these great examples constantly. And I would always just think like, oh, I love that. I want to be more like that. I want to do more of that. I want to make my wife feel like he does. Or, you know, I would see these great examples. And rather than focusing on like, hey, where have I been or what was my upbringing? I never really thought about it, to be honest with you. We were talking before this. I never talked about my upbringing. I was kind of embarrassed about it. I was, you know, like here I was speaking on stages of thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and I never really told anybody my story, like the truth. You know, I would give hints.
Okay.
And I some of it was embarrassment, you know, insecurities and all these kind of things. But to me, I just thought it never really mattered.
Yeah.
Like, why does it matter? Now, as I get older and a little bit more mature, I start realizing like there are a lot of people who are hurt and had maybe those similar circumstances or not, you know, didn't have a circumstance like that, and yet they still play the victim card or whatever. And so I realized how much maybe telling my story people can relate to and say, hey, I have the choice to change, you know? So.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we should talk a little bit about just kind of how, I mean, Jeff and I came from a culture, we had a great organization we were part of in Primerica, right? And had a lot of success there. People had a lot of success there. And we could probably talk a little bit about just maybe that and just how, you know, if we were to go back and do anything maybe a little bit different, how we would maybe do it different. I don't know.
Yeah, and I want to know what you both did on the daily, like when involving choice and decision. What are those things that you both did that you can look back and say that separated us from the rest of the pack, or that made, not even from the rest of the pack, but made us better and made you push yourself even further to attain more, because you guys are doing a lot right now, but you've accomplished so much, you know, not only personally, but, you know, in business and financially and with your families. So, you know, that's your whole premise was solid, right? Is being solid. And so what does that mean to you, and how did that come about?
Well, and really fast, I think to add in really quick, just for a little bit of perspective here on both of you guys, is that, I mean, for those of you that are listening, I mean, listen up to what they're going to say, because these two in their business, like it wasn't just a little bit of success. It was massive amounts of success and head and shoulders above the rest, really. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what Jeff's like statistics were in the business, but I know that Brandon was the youngest $1 million earner in a 12-month rolling period. So, I mean,
like
it was
ever.
before 30 years old, he made $1 million in a 12-month rolling period. So, I mean, he was setting company records, and they're recruiting hundreds of thousands of agents every year. You know, he's speaking at their conventions. They go to, you know, so like I knew Brandon's, you know, success in the business, and then he trained Jeff, which then Jeff, I think, even did it faster because you were able to coach him and kind of collapse those timeframes. So like what these guys did is super impressive, and nobody was doing it at the time. So anyway, I just wanted to give a little history there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, thanks.
It's humbling.
It is. You know, again, I look back to like Jeff's talking about a lot of the leaders and people he would look up to. I had the same thing, you know, great leaders, and like one of our mentors in our financial business was Hector Lamarck, you know, and Hector, some things I really respect and admire about him is the kind of man he is, the way he treats his wife, the way he treats his kids, the way he lives his life. He's built a big organization. He makes a lot of money, but those things are secondary to the kind of man he is. And what he would always preach is what I try to adopt still to this day is, you know, self-improve like a madman. You know, focus. Focus is a big key. And I think everything you do in private will eventually come out in public. And so you might be able to fake it for a little while, but eventually what you're doing in private will come out in public. And so I tried to remember that. And for me, in high school, I mean, I was a skinny, scrawny kid. Didn't like that when I was like a sophomore, and then
that changed
like midway through my, I'm not even going to respond to that.
Can you not feel skinny and scrawny?
Next question.
Sorry, dude.
I still feel that way, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks a
It
lot.
hasn't gone away. So about midway through my sophomore year, I was like, okay, I'm tired of this. And I got this old weight set. It was one of my cousin's old weight sets, and we brought it over to my parents' house, or to our house, and just this old weight set. And I just started working out, started lifting. And I think it was somewhere in my sophomore year. And since then, I just remember how I hated being the skinny kid. I wanted to put on some muscle, and I wanted to get stronger, and I joined the wrestling team. I always played a lot of basketball, but I wasn't tall or anything, So, I mean, I was a decent basketball player, but I wasn't this tall, guy. Not that you have to be that tall, but anyway, I started doing that, and I would never miss a day of lifting. And my friends would say, "Hey, come, let's go do this, go do that." I go, "I got to go lift first. You can miss one day." And I'm like, "No, I can't miss one day." I just made that a priority. So learning.
Why? Real quick before, because I think that's an important thing, because that's still your mindset today, right?
Still what I do today.
So what is it, do you think, that made, like, what was the thought process behind that? Like, what caused you to say, I'm just never going to miss a day? Because that created some massive discipline.
Yeah, man. I mean, couple things. I really paid attention to how I felt after I did it. Mm-hmm. I learned every day I didn't want to do it, but if I just did it, how great it felt after that I accomplished something. And it was something that I knew most people weren't doing, and I felt like it gave me an edge. And so that edge carried through to everything else.
That edge was confidence.
Confidence.
Yeah.
But you said there were days that you didn't want to do it?
Most days.
Okay.
Most days.
I watched this. I always watch several different videos, clips every morning. And one Alfie sent me this morning while I was at the gym. It was Tony Robbins, and he said, I take a cold plunge and get into that. I do that. Jeff does that a lot, right?
Every day, yeah.
But he says, Tony Robbins said, I take a cold plunge every morning, like first thing. Mm-hmm. And he goes, because I will not allow myself to negotiate with my soul. And it's like, do I want to? I mean, he says, F no.
Yeah, no.
He's like, I don't know if I want to do it.
Yeah.
But he does it. And that's, the premise that we want to start talking about is we make that easier by removing those emotions and getting the nervous system in balance and open up access to the heart. But there's still that determination, that habit, that habitual practice of what are you doing every day to improve yourself. And so I wanted to just call that out because, there's days that I don't want to go to the gym either because I'm tired or whatever. And I love going to the gym. Like I absolutely love because the way it makes me feel and days that I don't want to meditate and days, because there's things I got to get to, but you do it anyway because that's what separates you.
Yeah. Well, really, what's important to us, we'll make time for, and we'll make that the priority, So that's become a priority in my life since way back then, is just staying fit physically. Mm-hmm. Now that's there's a whole nother level to that. I think is your mental focus, your mental discipline, your spiritual discipline. Mm-hmm. I think those things are even more important. And so as I progressed, served a church mission, I still worked out all through that as well. Learned on my mission how important it was to, keep your spiritual life at the forefront of everything. You're kind of, I feel blessed to be able to have 2 years of my life where that was the focus. And then you get home and you get back into life and you forget it sometimes and you got to get back. And then it's a process. So, but my point is, on a daily basis, you got to get the important things done as a top priority every day, and then everything else can fill in outside of that. So, if you're a husband, a father, those things, as a husband, okay, I got to make sure, I do everything I can possibly do to become a better husband. I was telling my wife yesterday, I go, babe, I just want you to really want to be with me, and that's not on you, that's on me. You know what I mean? I think sometimes I just want my wife to love me more. Well, that's great, and we all want that, but that's on you, right? That's on me. Being I mean, I know if I'm a God-fearing man and I'm living my life the right way, that's automatic, right?
Mm-hmm. If you get the right things in order,
yeah,
and then that
your outward life is a reflection of your internal beliefs, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, if I'm following Christ 100%, there's nothing more attractive to people than that. You're going to attract people like a magnet because they're looking for. They're looking for that, right? They're looking for that. So anyway, just making sure that those things are in order. I notice a big difference if I don't read my scriptures diligently. Like there's a difference between reading and reading them and really studying, right?
Right.
I mean, even the past 6 months, I've been reading them, but I haven't been reading them diligently, and I've noticed a big difference. So I'm like, okay, I'm fixing that, getting back on track, because we're working on a lot of things in Solid, right? And so we're going to have these workshops we're putting together. And one thing that I just do not want to be is a facade, right? I don't want people to come and go, okay, great, you're preaching this stuff, but are you really doing it? Are you really living it? Again, what I'm doing in private will come out in public. Yep. So this stuff, it's accountability for me. Yeah. And I think building my Primerica business, it was accountability because I had to set examples for my people. And if they saw me not doing it, or if I was faking like I was doing it, they would eventually smell me out, right? You can't fake it. So I think that just every day you've got to wake up and go, okay, what are the things that are most important that I must get done to have the internal stuff that nobody sees done? Nobody sees me working out a lot of the time, right? Nobody sees the way I eat or whatever. Nobody sees me getting a cold shower this morning that I didn't want to do. Mm-hmm. Nobody sees that stuff. And but I know. Mm-hmm. I know it, right? Yep. And no one sees you cold plunge every day, right? And but you get out of that and you know you did it. So I don't know. I think those self-improvement on a daily basis. I mean, you can either listen to the radio or you can, listen to an audio book, or
a podcast.
Mm-hmm. You can watch YouTube for hours a day, or you can read a book. Mm-hmm. So just you've been talking a lot about this, making more right choices than wrong choices. Not perfect, but just every day, just a little bit better, stay consistent. And those daily things add up over time.
Right.
So I don't know what you would say to that, but
yeah, I think for me, I learned a lot of these, daily disciplines from Brandon. I would watch, he would teach us all these things like in fundamentals of the business things you got to do, prospects, set appointments, do appointments, right? And for me, I just, regardless of how I felt, just do them. I just tried to avoid the emotion of it and just build the discipline.
By the way, this is where you guys come in, right?
Yeah, no, it is.
We mastered discipline, doing it because we were supposed to do it. We were supposed to, whether we felt like it or not.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I believe you guys have a way to get to your place to where you can feel like it, and then how much better can you do it?
Right. And you're in more a state of flow and attraction rather than grit and resistance.
So we'll get to that.
And that is the point. That is the beauty of what you guys do. Is we always say, like, we could have if we would have known these things early on, but then would we take them as serious as we take them now?
Appreciate them now.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the hard part. Yeah. So
we would have been 10 times bigger, but it's all right.
Yeah, right?
if we would have embraced it.
But we still have a lot of time. We're still young.
Yeah.
So I think so those like daily disciplines in business, I like prospecting, for example, the most uncomfortable thing in the world for me was talking to someone I didn't know. Mm-hmm. I'm naturally an introvert. I love to watch people, but I don't always love to start a conversation. I always was that guy. I was like, someone say, "Hey, how's the weather?" I'm like, weren't you just out there? Like, I don't have anything to say about it. I
don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, right. That was like genuinely my internal response to people who would like start a conversation with me. Like, or like, "Hey, where did you? Oh, that's a nice jacket or something." Like, dude, why are you like, leave my jacket alone?
What's it to you?
Yes.
Do you want to get beat up?
So the conversation in my mind was always just, I didn't have a whole lot to say because I thought that it was obvious, right? Mm-hmm. What was happening in the world is obvious, and why do we need to talk about it? And then, so prospecting was very uncomfortable for me. So it was the thing I just decided to master. And I didn't avoid it. I actually put myself in situations where I didn't have a choice. Like for moving to a new city where I didn't know a single person. We couldn't use social media or the internet. It didn't exist, right? The internet existed, but social media did not. And
MySpace.
Yeah, nobody networked on MySpace. I never had a MySpace.
Nobody knows what MySpace is.
Yeah.
And their kids, really. I mean, you're like teenage, early 20s, so, you're not.
Exactly.
We didn't do that. So I had to go to a city and I had to start meeting people. If I wanted to make this work, regardless of my emotions, I had to do it, right? And so I developed a skill. Well, as I developed that skill and I started having some success with it, my confidence grew. And then as my confidence grew, I started realizing like, oh, I can do this. This is not that hard, and so that really helped. And then as I started, growing in business, then you start realizing some insecurities or different areas of my life. And so there would be things like I was scared to be poor again, Mm-hmm. And so I would save my money like crazy. There was times we were making 50, 60, 70 grand a month and my budget was 3,500 and I don't care. I'm not going $1 over it, every penny. And I had this saying like, hey,
I hear him, honey. Don't worry. I'm listening.
Right? It's like a small hole will sink the Titanic just like a big one will. And I would constantly say these
Plug
things.
them holes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and I realized looking back, there's healthier ways to approach that situation, but it's what I did.
Right.
I wanted to be financially successful, and I wasn't doing it to impress anybody. I was doing it out of this fear, really, of having to live like I grew up. Yeah. And so for me, it was like, okay, if I have to prospect, I'll just do it, regardless of how I feel about it. Save my money. I feel grateful I'm making this amount of money, and I'm going to save it so I never have to go back to how I was living. So then I was very disciplined with my money, and I still am. And
he still is, because I just pulled out my Remarkable and his pen is broken and it's $100. He's like, I'm not buying a new one. That's a waste of money.
Stupid pen.
Yeah, $100 for a pen. It's ridiculous, right? Yeah. So and then like fitness and I realized I heard a quote early on in my career: "Show me how you do anything, and I'll show you how you do everything." And I started realizing that success has more to do with who I am internally than the things that I do on a daily basis, right? Like Brandon, you were just saying that nobody sees you do those things. They don't, they just see the result. And everybody wants the result, but they avoid these daily disciplines because they're uncomfortable. So I just learned over the years that if I could get rid of the emotion around them, that I just do it without having to think, like a cold plunge. I don't want to touch the water before. I don't want to feel if it's cold. I know it's cold. I don't want to do it. Yep. So when I'm ready to do it, I don't think about it. I just get in, sit in the water, do what I decided I was going to do. Mm-hmm. And then I pay attention to how I feel and the results, and I love the result. So over the years, it was those things like prospecting, setting appointments, doing appointments. They were never comfortable. It was mandatory to get to where I wanted to go. And I just decided the discipline. I watched him. Like I used to say, he's a robot, seemed like he never had any emotions about what he was. And I know he did, right? But it seemed like it. I watched him control these daily disciplines, and I just went, I want to be like that.
Man, I would watch Rocky IV as a kid and go, dude, Rocky's a freaking machine, right? So when I was on my mission, people would go, Elder Neil's a machine. Because I woke up an hour early every morning, worked out, no matter what, never missed, right? On my mission. That was unheard of. Nobody did that stuff, right? But he got fat on their mission, right? Right, Kevin? For the most part.
They did.
You did.
No, I didn't.
It was
they did.
The mission edition.
But Jeff said something I think was really good there, is everybody wants a result, but they don't want to do the discipline part. I also think it's a matter of like people go, I would tell people what I did on a daily basis. I'll tell it right now to make $1 million a year in Primerica, right? Mm-hmm. It's not as much as most people think. It doesn't take as much as most people think it takes, but it takes more than most people will ever do.
Right. Yeah.
I used to say that all the time.
Yeah.
It's good for you.
So it doesn't take as much as you might think. It just takes consistency and consistently over a long enough period of time. Yep. So my formula was this: get 3 to 5 new prospects a day that you didn't know the day before. So 3 to 5 new names and numbers. And then set up 2 or 3 one-on-one appointments with those people within 24 hours. So I'd get your name. I'd find, let's say someone referred me to you, or I found you, I met you. I would then call you within 24 hours. Or Lexi would meet somebody, give me the number. I'd call them right away. Brandon Neal, I got a financial business. We're looking to expand, looking for some help. We opened a career change if the money was right. They'd always say yes. So I'd set up 2 or 3 appointments a day from that. And then my goal was to be on 2 qualified appointments every day. So when it came to my business and any business you're in, number one, you got to make sure the result portion of it is happening. This is my philosophy, right? The things that bring results has to be the top priority you do every day. Everything else that needs to be done is secondary to that. So I would do that every day. And then, so I would end up on appointments every night. And then the sales, and you need to know how to overcome objections and close sales, but you kind of did, but you kind of didn't. Because if you were in the right market, and our market was people that were married, had kids, they needed life insurance, they needed to invest for their future. So if you just did the amount of appointments, unless you really were terrible, the numbers worked out.
So and you can't get good without experience, and you don't get experience without discipline.
Right.
But here's what's crazy is I did that 3 to 5 names a day, 5 days a week for like 5 years, and I just couldn't find anybody else to do the same thing. And I think it's because along the way, it doesn't feel like you're getting anywhere.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden you find a guy like Jeff, or you find some good people. Like we had some great regional vice presidents that came into our business and really helped us to explode that. In spite of what I was doing, right? Because of that effort. But I recruited a lot of people who just left right away, or, a lot of clients that were they were good clients. They sent us referrals. And so I don't know. I would talk about that all the time. What's the secret? What's the secret? I go, okay, you guys ready for this? And it would take me like 10 minutes to tell that. And I go, that's it. What else? That's it.
Right.
So
and getting good with navigating the highs and lows within that, because you've got appointments that will cancel, and not getting too hung up on any one thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
and what helps us with that, right, is making sure that we always have the next appointment. Mm-hmm. We keep ourselves in a position, and I think if we do this in life, by the way, if we always keep ourselves in a position where we have something set that's in the future. So I would have 2 appointments fall through tonight, but I had 8 more that week.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or I had 2 or 3 people leave my business because they didn't want to do it anymore, but I had 10 more coming in. Mm-hmm. But you create that, right? So, I mean, there were a lot of times like, okay, I quit. Oh, I got appointments tomorrow night, so I'm going to have to go do those, and then maybe I'll quit after that. And I go on those appointments, then
recruit somebody, close the sale.
Yeah. So it was always that one more, just go one more day, just do one more appointment, right? Mm-hmm. The founder of our company said there's only one way to fail in our business. Don't set up an appointment. Mm-hmm. And I would argue that's any business out there, right? Yep. Only one way to fail. Don't set up the next prospect. Don't meet with the next person. Just keep setting them. Keep doing more. Yep. But we're building a solar company right now, and right now that's the focus we're trying to ingrain right now. And as our culture is, first things first, we got to make sure we're getting results. And there's a lot of things we're going to implement into our company to make it better and make it have the edge. But if we're not getting results to keep the company profitable, we won't have a company tomorrow.
Right.
Right. Yep. So you've got to be results oriented, results
kind of figuring out that formula too. Like you had it down to a formula of setting this many appointments, this many prospects. And so it's like, okay,
we knew the
stick
numbers.
to that. Yeah.
Yeah. What's your target?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So Alti, I'm going to ask you some questions, and both of you actually, because, Jeff said it perfectly where, it didn't matter how we felt. There were a lot of days I didn't feel like doing it, or a lot of days it's kind of interesting because that's not necessarily true for me, because if I didn't feel like it, I would just change my thinking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I do think it came from the heart, looking back on it. I just didn't recognize it was coming from the heart. Mm-hmm. I don't think I could have done what I did if it wasn't coming from the heart. I just don't think, because, you always talk about your heart's going to override your brain every time. And I believe we build our businesses with our heart. We just didn't recognize it. We thought it was all our thinking, because that's all the self-improvement stuff is talking about how you think, and it's all mental. And so, and I can control my thoughts. You can to a certain extent, but if your heart's not in the right place, you're not going to control your thoughts. Is that accurate?
Yep.
Yeah, totally. And probably in those moments you were actually driven by, there's probably fear a lot of the time, because that's can be a motivator too, but there was probably a lot more like courage and excitement and joy, because you close an appointment. That's a really great emotional response, and that's what drives you. So it was adrenaline, a lot more of the heart thing. Yeah. A heart emotion, and so in that, the front part of your brain is turned on, which is that creative part, the problem solution area. So you're seeing a way out of it, and you're seeing the next thing, and you're looking down the road, and you're seeing all the options instead of going into that survival, which most people do. And then all you can see is the roadblocks, and then they try to outthink their problems, and that's tough to do.
Yeah.
Like when an appointment goes bad, the stress response, you're going to have a very narrow focus and then everything turns to crap, right? Like you said, like, I'm going to quit, right? But that's the thing that a lot of people don't get past, right? I'm looking at the book right above Jeff's head, Resilience. Yeah. And that's what resilience is in the moment, can you shift back to a peaceful state, reset your physiology, and look at it from a different perspective? Oh, this is only one appointment. I got 8 more, right? But a lot of times it's with workouts. This wasn't a great workout. Now it's not. I'm not going to gain muscle, or I'm not going to. Everything in life can be stopped right at that stress point of like, oh crap, this didn't go well. Well, is it trying to teach you something else? Is it trying to make you more resilient? I mean, we can't, you can't always accomplish everything in the moment, but like you said, consistency over time is what makes things, what makes people successful.
Yeah.
Like when we remove the blocks, we can't make people do anything. That's an
agency type deal,
that's will, right? Like that's your free will or free won't. We were listening to a book on our
free won't.
There you go.
I'm going to use my free won't. I won't do that today.
Yeah, the free won't. Yep.
So we can't make people, jump into action. We can remove blocks. So like if we knew then what we know now, I think that it would just help to reset and save probably a lot of burnout. You guys just the energy expenditure you were using at that time was a lot. And you were young and you had it in you and you had something to prove. So that's where it came from. And that's cool. Like that's, but like to do that now in like your late 30s and 40s.
No, I can't. Yeah.
It just wouldn't. Yeah.
Could doing it and should doing it is different.
Yeah.
We could, but should we have been operating out of that space is a different thing.
Exactly.
Right.
Because it does impact your health eventually. I mean, I blew out my adrenal glands. I did.
Totally.
I remember when I started, like I would wear a suit and I would start sweating through the suit. We'd just be sitting here. And then I remember one time I called his doctor and I'm like, dude, something's up. I would tell him, he's like, what's wrong? I go, I'm just like sit there sweating. I'm not nervous. I'm nothing, just sweating, And he knew immediately what it was. And he was like, oh, you're probably focused on high performance constantly. Oh yeah. So,
totally.
And he knew. And so, but I think it was out of that constant, like I was going to push regardless of, it didn't matter what was, I will push through it. I will go through it. And that's what I did. But is that what I should have done? Of course not. There's a better way, right?
Well, and see, you bring up a good point because you said just a couple minutes ago, like you did it without emotion, which wasn't entirely the case because you did it from emotion. But what emotion were you doing it from? You were doing it from a state of stress or a state of fear or a state of lack or a state of frustration or anger. So we may think that in the moment we're doing it without emotion. We're just confusing ourselves and not telling ourselves the real story because obviously, from a medical perspective, you were pumping out so much adrenaline and cortisol in the moment that you got adrenal fatigue.
Listen to this. I just pulled up adrenal problems on one of my apps that I like to use to work on people. But it's like, there's a whole list here, but like two that pop out with what you were going through was misusing the will and feels that one must struggle for success, power, or position. Yeah. So it was like there was just that energy that you were using had to come from somewhere. Yeah. Right. And so it was just an imbalance and it worked in some ways to produce, but then it was taking it from somewhere else that long term is going to be something you're going to have to address. Yeah. It's funny you say that because when I started working with this guy, it was right around, this was probably about a year before we had Rome, this would have been 9 years ago. So I started working with him. The biggest month we ever had in our career was the month that Rome was born. And that was when I really started paying attention to my lifestyle, how I was responding to stressful situations. Was I trying to push? Brandon always gives me a hard time about wanting to do things early in the morning. And it's not that I don't want to wake up or do things early. I'm just very protective about the amount of sleep I get and protecting my energy and making sure that my response is correct today, right? I can't control tomorrow or yesterday's gone, but today I just want to make sure that I can perform at the highest levels today. But yeah, it's funny how that, you look at that time, and then when I did started changing, we actually started having a lot more success because rather than trying to feel like I had to push through it, I started realizing, hey, if I just do the right things, if I just do what I'm supposed to do, great things are going to happen.
but I didn't believe it. And I think a lot of that came out of insecurities, where I was always trying to like measure myself up to somebody, or trying to be like somebody else. You know, and I'm so grateful that I had, you know, examples like Brandon. At the same time, I wish I could go back and tell myself, like, hey, you're enough. Take what you can get from them and just perform, you know, add whatever you want to add, but be you. Change the things that you need to change inside of you, but you're enough. You're good enough, and it's going to happen as long as your daily disciplines are correct and you do them with the right emotion.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.